Hey, and welcome back to Ontario Cryptids. I hope you all had a Merry Christmas this past Friday. I would like to thank you for your warm wishes that I've received, and I'm absolutely stuffed from eating turkey on Friday and yesterday. Let's get right to the stories today with very little talking on my behalf. I have 3 stories to tell. One is a 2-parter, so in actuality, you're going to be getting 4 stories. I know you will enjoy these as much as I enjoyed telling them. Okay, here's where you go grab yourself a hot or cold beverage and then sit back and relax. So this first story takes place in the summer of 1975 in a small rural town called Burlington, Mississippi. I lived in Mississippi when I was a child. I was about 6 years old when this occurred. I was sleeping in my bedroom one night on the 2nd floor of our home when the neighbor's dog began barking wildly at something in the yard. It made such a ruckus that my sibling and I finally got out of bed to see what the commotion was all about. Looking down from the window, we saw something in the garden that was right next to the house. There was only natural light, but the thing was only about 20 to 30 feet away, and I can still remember it vividly. It was squatting down eating the vegetables from the plants there. I could even hear it eating from where I stood. A moment later, we all screamed in surprise and shock at what we saw. It looked up at us and kept right on eating. I remember that by its mannerism, it had no fear of us whatsoever and made no attempts to leave the area or hide in any way. What I remember was a creature that was built like a human being. I can't say exactly how big it was, but I know it was bigger than the average person. It was all covered over with dark, shaggy brown hair, and when it looked up at us as we stood in the window, its eyes glowed white in the darkness. Eventually, my grandfather woke up and saw it too. He went outside the door with his gun and fired up into the air. We continued to watch out of the window and then saw the creature stand up and run off on 2 legs into the woods towards the river. I remember it ran so fast that I could hardly believe it. The next morning, we found very large human-like footprints in the garden. I had never seen anything like that before and never have since. This area is rural and heavily wooded. Wow, what a great story and very well written. I'm sure you and your siblings will never forget this encounter. I did take a closer look at Burlington. What a cool little town in the sense that on one side is Louisiana and the other side is Mississippi, and they are right on the border in Mississippi. They are surrounded by water and swampland, and on the Louisiana side is Pearl River Wildlife Management Area. But all around it, there are what appears to be forest areas and some farmlands. But there's a lot of waterways, a lot of little rivers flowing through. So a lot of areas where these creatures can be living and hiding out in. All right, let's go to the next story. Okay, so this next story is one of 2 parts, which I'm just going to say one after another because they both take place on the U.S. Air Force Academy in Colorado Springs, Colorado. The first story takes place in the summer of 1991. I was a cadet at the U.S. Air Force Academy in Colorado Springs, Colorado back in the summer of 1991. I had been at the academy for only a few weeks and was finishing up basic training when it happened. Now, the academy itself sits on the foothills of the Colorado Rocky Mountains. Basically, I could step out of the cadet area and I would be standing in the mountains. There is plenty of brush, trees, and so on to conceal just about anyone or anything you want back there. Anyhow, one night about 9 p.m., my roommate and I were laying in bed chatting about our upcoming campout in Jacks Valley, an area just beside the academy where we did a lot of field training, when we heard what sounded like a woman screaming her head off. It was absolutely horrific to hear. What was most interesting was that prior to the blood-curdling noise, we could hear other cadets in their rooms talking and joking. The campus was basically shut down for the night, and everyone was getting ready for the next day. I remember the ambient noise being rather loud. Then this scream came. All of a sudden, you could have heard a pin drop. It was so quiet. I turned and asked my roommate if he had heard what I and everybody else just heard. I know, what a dumb question. He looks at me and says, "Oh yeah, that's a local Bigfoot." I couldn't believe it, but of course I heard it. He then proceeds to tell me about a buddy of his who saw a big, hairy human drinking at a local lake. When it saw his friend watching it, it stood up, turned away, and walked into the forest. Of course, the next week in Jacks Valley for me was a very nervous affair. I was more worried about getting up at night and walking to the Lateran by myself than I was running the assault course. Okay, so here is the second story, and it seems like this cadet was there for roughly 4 years. So here's what he writes. The story you have heard about the cadet and that Bigfoot in Jacks Valley are true. It was known in my class at the academy as the Watcher. The moniker was given to the resident Bigfoot because every now and again, alert cadets reported seeing the thing watching the cadets from the western edge of the course and often let itself be seen, almost like it couldn't stand not being part of the action, or maybe it was lonely and curious. Truly, I don't know if it was always the same Bigfoot or not, but to me, I presumed it was. It looked the same every time I saw it. About 4 times in a year I was in the Springs, but it could have been a different individual. Most of the time it would be in the same spot for hours, apparently curious about us, or maybe we were entertainment. Who knows? To my knowledge, it was reported often and matter-of-factly, but we were never told to keep quiet about it. But I do know many of us knew it was the residents of Jacks Valley and said nothing. The Watcher was not there every time I was. We joked about it amongst ourselves, like that's what you would end up looking like when a cadet flunks out of the academy. Stupid stuff like that. We never thought of it like we would a bear. It was more like a man with a shoulder span that was enormous and very black, sometimes just a shadow that moved. In the sunlight, it had a heavy coat of fur, slick like a bear, stood around in the tree line most of the time just like any man, but this man was butt ugly. I didn't have too much time to think about it while I was there. It was never general conversation. It was 31 years ago now, and of course, the Jack Valley Watcher was like a local mascot. We talked about it and pulled some rank bullshit pranks, but this story was true. What I find surprising is that more isn't made of the situation. Nobody cared back then. It was just there, and most stayed pretty squared away with it. No sweat, you know. It wasn't headlines or anything of particular interest back then like it is today. Now that was another great story. I'm sure if we kept digging, I would probably find more of these cadets at this particular Air Force base, but let's move on to the last story. This last story takes place October 31st, 2020 in Perry County, Ohio. Nearest town is Logan. 10 of us rented a cabin in the woods Thursday, October the 29th through Sunday, November the 1st. It was located in Logan, Ohio, part of the Hocking Hills area. Everything was normal till Friday. We all started smelling a nasty smell, couldn't figure out where it was coming from. Didn't smell it in the cabin, just outside. Late Friday night after midnight, 2 people were on the deck and everyone else went to bed. They started hearing loud noises like branch breaking and felt like they were being watched. Sometimes it sounded like something was being thrown. They thought it was one of us pranking them. Then came a loud bang near them, so they ran in the cabin from the upper deck. The one guy came into my room and told me what was going on. So me and another girl went down to the kitchen area and we all started looking out the windows. I turned all the lights out. Within minutes, the one girl yelled, "There it is!" I went to the kitchen window and in the field right in front of me stood a large black figure walking on 2 feet towards the cabin. We all started yelling, "What is that?" It then all of a sudden turned and went back into the woods it came out of like it heard us. We then got everybody up and we all went out on the deck and heard weird howling sounds that none of us had heard of before. We heard loud noises like branch breaking. Then we heard a loud sound coming from the front of the cabin to the left. We all moved to the front and heard bipedal walking and branches breaking and seeing something moving around. And that is where we found a footprint. And that is how the story ends, with the footprint, which reminds me of 2 separate times I have found a footprint. The first footprint I've already told you guys about in my first encounter story that I've mentioned previously on my channel. On that occasion, I found a partial footprint. Actually, it was my nephew's girlfriend at the time, wife now, who was the first to see the footprint, and it was a partial footprint of the half, like the toes and the foot pads. Only one side, so it was only one print, and you can see the toes playing in the mud, and you can see every single digit. The second time was just this year. The second time I was on a hike with a friend in Monocliff Provincial Park, and we were going up a steep incline, and I guess the footprint was caught in the mud, but it had dried out, so you can see this massive footprint semi-sliding down this hill, but you can perfectly see the outline of this footprint. Now, the unusual part was, for whatever reason, on both occasions, I did not take a photograph of the footprint. Why? I have no idea, because being a Sasquatch enthusiast, you would think I would want to take a picture as proof. But for whatever reason, I said no. In fact, I was talking up this footprint while people were walking around us, and I recall picking up a stick and outlining the footprint almost like I was destroying the evidence. It was really weird. It was really bizarre. I mean, we put our foot in it and everything and compared my foot size to the size of the footprint. And I have recently asked my friend if she took a picture of it, because we both had cameras that day, but I did not really take any photos of that. I did take photos of the hike itself and everything else that we did, like the beautiful scenery, etc., the wildlife, the creeks that are flowing through there. But for whatever reason, I did not take a picture of the footprint. Anyways, yeah, so those are the 2 separate times that I've come across a footprint, and I'm probably never going to have the opportunity to take a picture of another one. All right, I'm going to stop babbling now. So I hope you all are having a fantastic holiday season. I know in this household we've been eating nothing but turkey the past 2 days and just been comatose the entire time. But that's going to mark the end of this episode. I would like to remind you that if you have a story that you would like to share, then please forward your stories to OntarioCryptids@gmail.com. Okay, so that is going to be a wrap for today. I would like to thank everybody for continuing to support my channel by liking the videos and commenting. I truly appreciate it, and I hope you guys have a wonderful Sunday. So that being said, we will see you all next week.